a lot of things here. Buttons to press. Okay.
So this episode is inspired by my eldest son, who I was watching the other day, and so much of the movement that he involuntarily does reminds me of some of the exercises that we do in Pilates. And since he's been born, movement has really been his thing. And we were that family who were waiting outside for the play group to open because he was up raring to go. We couldn't contain him in the house. And then we'd walk a few miles to get there so we could stop burning off that energy. And still today, he's a really active child. And when he started school, I'd pick him up and he would sometimes just burst through the door and he'd instantly want to run and climb. But where is he? Oh, he's up that tree. And some days I could really tell, and I still can, if he's had to sit still all day by the sheer physical energy he has when he comes out of school. Does that resonate with you?
It totally resonates with me. I remember with one of ours that they would be banging at the door to get out to play in the garden from really early, and we had to explain like what time the clock needed to say before he could get out in the garden, so he wasn't like waking up all of our neighbors.
And then you become that parent that's like, I'm a reasonable time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm usually the one judging about, is there anybody else making noise out and about? And we have amazing neighbours, and one of our neighbours used to play professional football, and he always said, as soon as we moved in, we just love to hear children outside playing.
Wow.
And that was sort of my, yes, a green light. We're in the right place. And it encouraged us to have the boys outside playing even more and just kind of let loose, really.
That is amazing.
And actually, the same thing would often happen with us, and still, if I'm honest, happens with us, even though our boys are a little bit bigger, that if they have not burnt off energy in the day, that energy has to go somewhere. And I know we're talking about boys. I don't think that it's isolated to boys.
No.
I was the exact same. When I was growing up, I was outdoors climbing, playing, running around, playing in the fields, up the tree, in the old ruin, down in the field. And I was out and active. So it doesn't surprise me in the least that my children are the same way. And I think that it's really important we encourage and support that as much as we possibly can. So yes.
But isn't it funny how as a society, we are intent on telling our children to stay still, sit nicely. They're sitting down at desks for most of the day at school. And do you know what? I am guilty of it too sometimes. You just want them to sit still in some environments. And actually, sometimes they do need to be still. So
there are environments where they need to be sitting down. That there's, if you went to the theatre or the cinema or something like that, they're going to sit because they understand why. There's a purpose. There's an obvious social situation where sitting is what you do. The difficulty that our bodies have is that they're hardwired to move. And if we're continually resisting what our natural hardwiring and urges are, then it's really unhealthy for our mind and our body, because we're starting to shut down the communication that our body's saying. It's like you sitting at your desk at home and you're thinking, oh, my shoulders are a bit stiff now. You have agency. You go, okay, I'm going to get up and do that bonkers thing that Claire taught me to do, standing against the wall again, because you have the freedom to do that. Our young people, that freedom is taken away the moment they go to school, because they're being told to sit down and sit still. And it's in early years, it's often the case where they get to sit on the floor, which is fantastic, because we should all have the freedom and capability in our bodies to sit on the floor. And sitting on the floor, I mean, we wouldn't sit still on the floor, would we?
No.
If you sat on the floor, you'd be fidgeting. It gets uncomfortable quickly. So the appropriate thing to do is listen to your body going, oh, that bum cheek hurts from sitting that way for so long. I'm going to move. And you move. And children deserve the same autonomy to do that, I believe. And there's loads of things. So for your boys, the things that you could do is getting a stretchy band and tying it around the legs of the chair. So if you're having dinner and they're a bit on the move because they haven't had much opportunity
to sit down unless I tell them to.
Okay.
They will stand by the table and go up.
Yeah.
And then they'll dance off somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then they're back again.
Brilliant. So we set it up where it's just standing, you can stand. We're going to eat together because that is very important in our family values. So we eat and you can stand. We often,
that's interesting.
Now they're older, but certainly when they were younger, we did a lot of it's fine. You can stand as long as you're with us to eat.
Oh, okay.
We also have we have a tradition of carpet tea.
Oh, you mentioned that, yeah.
So where we put a blanket out and we just all sit around cross-legged and just eat on the floor, because then it's encouraging that movement. And I think, you know, what I was saying before about schools have a system that they fall within and rules that they have to follow. So I feel like the way we've set it up, certainly for us, is that our goal is to counterbalance the lack of movement in the day.
Yeah.
So for you, it's the same thing with the boys. Can you look for as many freedoms and opportunities as you can to support them moving at the rest of the time? And maybe that's running up and down the street in the morning, you know, doing some drills, or you know, we've got those little cones and little mini hurdles and bits and pieces and the ladder. So things can be done to get them going and energized. And really, they're going to do better at school the more they move physically. Anyway, we've talked about this even as grown-ups. We need to have the freedom of movement so we can have freedom of thinking.
Yeah.
So,
because what I was going to ask you is, you know, are we on a losing battle trying to get them to stay still? But I like that you've said you can work with it and adapt what you do. And actually, does it matter if they stand up at the table? When you think about it, no, except for the food that they drop.
Oh, but they're going to drop it anyway. Just get a dog. The thing is, I mean, I'm a real why person. So if there's a rule, I was so annoying. Can you imagine trying to teach me as a child? I mean, you know, hats off to all of my teachers over the years, because honestly, and my parents obviously too, because I was a why person. I wanted to know why, you know, what's the purpose of that rule? Why is it that we should sit at the table? Why is it that, you know, we've talked about this before, you know, my kids were always climbers. I let them climb whatever was there to climb. And that was fine, because that's our beliefs. I believe that movement is part of who we are, how we're designed. And so I want to encourage that wherever I can, and counteract where movement's being removed out of our lives.
Because that can be contrary to societal norms, which encourages that children should sit still. And do you know what? I was reading that school break times in England have got shorter
appalling.
The last 2 decades, and older pupils have lost more than an hour a week as lessons are increasingly eating into lunch and playtime. Afternoon breaks used to be the standard in nearly all primary school children, but they've now been virtually eliminated. And a quarter of secondary schools now have lunch breaks of 35 minutes. Or less. And to add to that as well, when I was doing a bit of research on this, I was really surprised it doesn't seem to be a legal amount of break time required for school children. I'm ages looking for it, and please, if anyone's listening and I've got that wrong, let us know. But from observing our own children, that seems such an important thing, like you say, for that brain break.
I mean, I know with our middle one, I think his lunch break something like 25 minutes is absolutely off this chart. And you think it used to be called playtime.
Yes.
You know, it wasn't just about lunch and eating lunch. No. You know, we discovered that there's hardly even enough time for a child to queue up, get food, let alone eat that food at a pace that's appropriate for them, let alone then have time to digest that food by moving before going and sitting in a hot, clammy classroom. So ours take a packed lunch because then that way they've got it ready to go, and it affords them more time to move. And I know that can be difficult to fit into your life. And if you believe your children need to move more, then that's a shift that's worthwhile making.
Yeah.
I mean, I can say that because I'm not actually the one making the packed lunches. I won't lie, because if my husband's listening to the podcast, he'll be like, oh, it's fine for her to say, but he's the packed lunch maker. They love his packed lunches.
Wow.
But then you need to move so that your organs are stimulated to digest, or your food is going to sit there and stagnate and not actually do the job you've eaten it for. So your brain is not going to get what it needs. And it's just this sort of vicious cycle. They really need that movement. Yeah.
And I was reading recently, actually, that there'd been a study, I can't remember where it was, around the importance of moving after eating for things like blood sugar and bringing your blood sugar down, and as well as the things that you've
Well, it's what we,
about.
you know, what we would have done naturally. We would have eaten just the right amount. We wouldn't have overeaten. We would have eaten something that was balanced to provide the nutrition to our entire body and all the systems that need it. And movement is going to aid your digestion, and it does so much for you, actually.
It's such an important thing, isn't it? And remember when we did the episode on technique, and I was saying about staying in that same position at my desk, and you were saying, and correct me if I've got this wrong, it can literally cause like a kink in the
a kink in the hose.
Yes, a kink in the hose. And so would I be right in saying that can happen to children sat at a desk, for example, for a long period of time?
Of course. I mean, it's frightening, actually, when you look at the technique that's affecting our young people, because you know, they're on technology a lot.
They are a lot more at school, actually. I've forgotten about that. I'm still thinking of when I was at school and we were hunched over, like, writing.
With a pen and a pad, yes.
You're right. They're on iPads or whatever it is that they're using at school.
And then you think, like, in an office environment, if you were on a computer, it's likely that it's your setup, that it's pretty reasonably ergonomically designed for you. What I understand is in a lot of cases, it isn't like that in schools, and perhaps they're on high up stools and not a supportive chair. So then they are going to be falling into different postures. What's different about young people is, unlike us, where we're a little bit more fixed, takes a little bit more work to, get the motion. They're still really quite pliable when they're young. It's why, if you think, the example that I think of is when I get an adult come to class for the first time and they did dance, ballet, for example, as a young person, and they've maybe done it from the age of 5 to the age of 18, and they've gone off to uni or whatever. In those years when their body was forming, their body has formed to the activity it was doing. So the physical activity of dance has developed their bone structure, because the bones are soft. Like, if you think about how you gave birth to your babies, you know they were soft and pliable then. And it's through the movements that they do as they begin to look around and crawl and then get up to standing. It's those actions they do physically with their body that develop. Everything from the arches of our feet are developed from the way that we crawl, the way that we develop into walking. All of those movements we go through are what builds the body that we end up in. So when you get that little bit older and you do something like ballet or gymnastics or whatever it is, it can also be the nothing, the sedentary life, the sitting on game stations and whatever else from a young age. You become the shape you mold to, because their bones are so soft.
So what might you see in someone, giving that example of someone who's done ballet from the age of 5 to 18, and then they go to university or something like that?
So they're going to come to class and their feet and their legs are going to be turned out, because that's what they've been trained into and grown into.
Yeah.
Their shoulder blades might be smaller and flatter and toward the back of their ribs rather than rounder and towards the side of their ribs. They might have quite a flatter, so we have some curves in our spine. So we have like inwards at your neck and inwards at your lower back, outwards at your skull, outwards at your shoulders and between your cheeks.
Yeah.
Okay. And if they've been stood upright at the ballet bar, those curves might be smaller. They might be a little bit more straightened out. So the same applies. That gives quite a not an extreme, but a clear example of a dance, you know, a physical activity. Everything we do is a physical activity. Us standing here, the way we're doing it is molding how we'll be tomorrow. When our little people are little and their bones are soft, those bones are growing into the shape of the activity that they do.
So to give you an example, we were talking before we started recording, my eldest son does gymnastics. So not particularly seriously, he does a couple of hours a week. What's that doing for him or to him?
So he is developing the flexibility in his body that's required to do whatever type of gymnastics it is. He's building strength in his bones and shaping them just as the ballet dancer would, that will stay with him for the rest of his life. So a common thing with the shape of a male pelvis is a little bit different to a female pelvis. So oftentimes men come to Pilates and they feel like their hamstrings are a bit tight. And they can't touch their toes. Part of that is because of the shape of their pelvis. Part of that is because they haven't used them in a way that's allowed them to become flexible. So for your son, he won't be that way because right now he'll be able to touch his toes like it's nothing, Mum. And then he will continue to be able to do that as he continues to do gymnastics. So if he's doing it while he's a teenager as well, it's likely that he won't have that can't touch my toes feelings.
How much would be genetic, for example, and how much would be affected by that in your opinion? So I'm just thinking now, and I'm going to do it.
Great.
That I, at my grand old age, I used to do dancing, not loads, but I did a bit, and I can still touch my toes.
Go on then, I'm standing back. I don't touch your toes.
I don't think I can get my.
Very good.
But that's So what I want to know is that because I did dancing when I was, and I now do Pilates, or is it a bit of luck?
Well, it could be a combination of both. It's really hard to say. I mean, how much dance did you do? How often? What age? Everything feeds into that. Have you continued your whole life going, oh, touch my toes, and kept repeating that? And also, the other piece of it is your attitude. You believe that you're the sort of person who can just touch their toes at the drop of a hat, therefore you can.
I also believed I could still do a cartwheel. Turned out I could, but it probably wasn't
not pretty. I love a good cartwheel. That's brilliant.
It's really funny because since doing Pilates, I've realised that my children involuntarily do some of the exercises. So, I'll look over and I can be talking to one of them. They're doing a rocking ball, or they'll suddenly, go into a swan or a child's pose when I'm chatting to them. They don't know it's Pilates. They might have an idea now from watching me, but they don't know. They're just doing it because it feels good. And I really love to watch how naturally it comes to them. But so how come as adults we have to go to Pilates classes to relearn these exercises, which I reckon maybe I used to do? I can't remember because my brain told me, oh, you need to do that and it feels good. So how and why do we lose that innate ability?
Oh my gosh, part of it actually goes back to where we started this conversation today, that we are going to school and then we're editing out that ability, that agency to just do what feels good. And there are those, like you said, that you know, societal norms that it isn't, you know. So for example, today I was on Steph's Pat Lunch, and I'm a lunch mate, and I sit, and it's so much fun. I absolutely love the experience of it, but it's sitting, and I never sit. So every break, I'm up there, I'm stretching, I'm doing all of the things.
Really?
And I don't give two hoots that everybody's watching, that it's not normal to other people to do that. But I'm not going to go from there aching and sore because I've sat in that position for that whole length of time. And if we can start to push those boundaries, another example is in airports. So when I was doing lots of traveling to do my training with Lolita, I was at all these different airports, and it was for lengthy periods of time. I had my little travel case, I had a fold up mat, I had a ball, I had a spiky ball, I had a stretchy band, and wherever I was, I just did my workout because I needed to look after my body to be able to do what I want to do and live healthily and look after my future self. And as adults, you know, we worry a lot about what other people's thinking, what are the, you know,
you're never going to see them again.
And then control. No. So if you don't do it and they look at you and they might be like, oh, here's a bit funny. You can't control that. So why does it matter what else you do? And I think if we can start to slowly nudge and change that, it will make the world of difference. And I'm not saying that that's easy necessarily for people to do, but why wouldn't we just do the thing that looks after ourselves?
And that's where we go back to the child. I'm thinking, if I was, you know, you waited for a plane or whatever, and you've got your children there and they want to run about and they want to, and the first thing that you probably wouldn't say, I would say, because you're worried about, well, what will people think? Are they irritating other people? Is, come and sit down.
Okay, so the thing that I would do is set a boundary.
Okay.
So we create, because of course I don't want to annoy people either. And I will create a boundary that's respectful and works for everybody, whatever that might be. If there's an outdoor space, we're going to tag teams so that one parent, you know, something like that. Or we go to a different terminal where there's not a lot of people waiting, and we'll do weaving in and out, we'll do push-ups on the chairs, we'll do whatever it is, but we will make a boundaried activity that allows that movement.
But isn't it great that kids know what to do? They know.
It's not going to be, I've lost it.
We're going to be on a plane in a minute, therefore I need to get energy out now and move because I'm going to be strapped in a seat in a minute.
Because kids, you know, back to what we're saying about sort of the cultural bit, kids are not comparing themselves to other folk.
No.
But we're, you know, all of us, social media and all of those things that are out there, you know, the Instagram nation where we're all comparing ourselves and scrolling and making instant judgments about people all the time. If we can edit away from that, that would help us a lot.
So is Pilates essentially helping us to be children again?
Helping us to be children again.
You know, to regain that
I wish we could turn back time at Pilates class, but
sometimes we have fun. Do you know, tonight I was just saying this to you before, I've just done a reformer class and we did is it jumping? I don't know what you call it.
Yeah, just say jumping.
Jumping on the foot bar. And we all said, and I feel and it was that feeling of being a child, like jumping free on a trampoline or something like that.
And why have we lost that? Like, you know, movement or exercise is so often seen as punishment and a chore, and you've got to fit it in, and people pay memberships for things and then they don't go, and then they have guilt about not going and all of that, blah blah blah. Exercise is nourishment, not punishment. Just like what you eat, you know, everything that we consume has, you know, cost benefit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So is what we're consuming benefiting us? Is the movement we consume benefiting? Are we getting enough of the right sorts of movement? In the same way as you wouldn't eat all carbs.
Yeah.
you need to get, well, movement nourishment too. So you might think, well, I spend maybe 2 hours every evening on the sofa watching Netflix, and I spend 8 hours sitting on a chair at my desk at work. So maybe I need to look at a more balanced movement diet if it's all sitting like that, you know. And I think, you know, even then people go, well, I'm just going to drive in my car to go to the gym down the street. Let's just walk or jog or jump around your living room. I always think about that episode of Friends when Phoebe goes running and Rachel's embarrassed. And Phoebe's like, I'm embarrassed of you. And she goes, right, just run freely and has fun. We need to find the ways of moving that's fun.
And it doesn't matter if they see me because I'm gone.
You're gone. And it's not about anybody else but you. And the example that you set to your children, which is what we're talking about today, is that your children move and explore how movement feels and do what feels good because they see you do the same. Behavior is caught, not taught. We've said it before.
So we've got exercises, nourishment,
not punishment.
Behavior is caught, not taught. Love that. So when I was a child, like many others, you know, I took it for granted how easily I could move. You know, I was fortunate. And, you know, I had usual childhood scrapes on the knees. And I also dislocated my elbow, actually. I was thinking about this.
Oh, my goodness, that's interesting.
Several times when I was about 8. Some kids next door were giving me I don't know if you ever a leg and a wing.
Oh. Yeah, everybody else listening's remembering that too.
Leg and a wing.
Broke your wing.
Yeah, the wing broke. Just recovered from that and fell down in the playground. Did a lady yank me up?
Oh no!
And it went again. But so that was it. But we're kind of that I'm aware of anyway repercussions on that. So I was really fortunate. But then when I was about 14, I damaged my coccyx in a gymnastics class at school. So I mistimed to flip on the horse. I must have flipped over to it and just slammed my lower back against the horse. And you know, it was obviously a really long time ago, so I can't remember that much about it, but I do remember that the next day I couldn't get out of bed.
Oh my god!
I was like set in the position, and that lasts, I can't, maybe for say 24 hours or something like that. And then I just carried on going with it. And
of course,
but for years and years, I couldn't lie flat on a hard, I couldn't lie on a floor flat, couldn't up again, or I could, but it was agony. So I just didn't do that. It was too painful. And then I forgot about it until I was, for the first time, in about 7 months, suddenly the old coccyx that I hadn't felt for years reared up again. And for a few weeks, I was crawling around on my hands and knees because I couldn't walk because it was hurting so much. So that's a bit of a long story, but there is a point. So what I'd like to know is, could my 14-year-old self have done something to prevent that pain rearing its head? And I suppose my point is here that we have these, and it felt a minor injury. It wasn't a particularly big deal at the time, but I obviously lay still because it hurt. So what could I have done? And is there anything I could have done to prevent it popping up again? I'm sure it'll come, I feel like it'll come again at some point.
It might.
It's lying dormant, so
brilliant. You've got a dormant coccyx.
It's that I just feel like I don't know what will trigger it, but I know something will.
Something might. The thing is, it comes back again to, you know, our anatomy and movement and how our bodies are designed, and actually it's designed to heal itself. So a lot of healing just took place naturally, and you were at that young age,
of course,
so there was more capacity for healing there. And any injury, whatever it is, when you're pregnant, can rear up. That's so common that old injury, whatever that old injury is, comes back when you are pregnant because of all of the hormone relaxin you'll have probably heard of, where you're creating more space and movement and laxity in your body, which means something that's fixed itself to become stable, like your coccyx, it then becomes a bit more relaxed. So the stabilizing healing that took place isn't the same, it isn't there. So then it can rear its head. So anything else that might occur in your life where hormones might change,
whatever could happen,
might just bring about some more information and feedback to you about your
because I don't think I would have put like hormones, coccyx, like what? Together. They seem to be two separate things to
all of our systems,
to the layman,
in our body are connected and work in this symbiotic way. There is no system that's just like working on its own.
Yeah, of course. When you say, well, I think I'm not alone in thinking that an injury, it's just that bit that's injured.
Oh, yes. I mean, that's, as a Pilates teacher for many years, that's what we're working with on a daily basis. And I teach my students the same thing, that generally we separate everything off.
Yeah.
And even something like, I do my exercise for that thing when I go to that class, and my exercise for this thing when I go to that class, but you're exercising everything all the time.
Legs, bums and tongues.
Oh my God. There's no such thing as leg day. This is the in joke in our house, where, the idea that you're just going to go to the gym and train one area of your body is just the most bonkers thing to me. But, each to their own.
So moving on to sort of teenage years, I think I, like many other teenage girls, became less active as I grew older. I grew out of playing on the street. I didn't really do any sport outside of school. I had done dancing lessons, and I gave that up about 15, and I reduced what I was doing. But I was reading in a World Health Organization report that stated that 85% of adolescent girls don't do enough physical activity. And one of the reasons this study had found why they were stopping sport was because of the competitiveness of sport wasn't necessarily appealing to girls of that age. They didn't want to compete. They might have wanted to do the sport, but they didn't want to compete. And if they didn't want to compete, there weren't necessarily those opportunities for them to compete. And thinking about competition made me think back to the conversation we had with Jo in the episode around Pilates and the community.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Jo said she really liked about Pilates that appealed to her was that it isn't competitive.
No, not at all.
There isn't really anyone to compete with in class, is there? Which is one of the brilliant things about Pilates.
Absolutely. That's interesting, because I guess, my experience, because I always danced, and that wasn't really competitive. I didn't do competitive dance, of course. I didn't do that, so I was always still really active at that time. And I think, I was very lucky, and it was a real kind of minority at the time to have dance available, and I did the equivalent of GCSE and A-level dance. It's not amazing. And then I did a diploma in dance performance, and then I did a degree in dance.
So you were the minority. A lot of people give up a hobby, if it's a hobby like that.
For sure. That's so give that up surprising.
I was talking to my husband about this, and we were talking about why do we give things up sort of mid to late teens? And we were saying, I think there's just other things going on. There's other appeal.
There's
I want to go out with my
other
friends.
Appeals,
There's other
freedoms that you're getting. So you're getting that freedom to go out, and you're building social relationships that are independent of your parents. You're going to other activities that might not be physical activities. And that's really fascinating. And I think there's a great opportunity, particularly for girls, because I have a particular interest in how we educate women to be women in their bodies and know about their bodies, there's a great opportunity actually to integrate Pilates into what those young adolescent girls do, because it isn't competitive. They learn about their bodies, how they function, what everything is for, and how they can use it, and how they can listen to it and sense and understand when something is changing, and what that communication means, and how that would really inform them in later life. Like if you had done that before you had your coccyx injury, you would have dealt with that in a very different way, because you would have understood that motion is lotion, and that you would have gotten up and done some movement after 24 hours where you were using your breath in there. You might have done some gentle tissue release in there. Like there's other things you might have done if you had been informed about your body. And you know, Pilates is fun. Imagine if you'd been doing Pilates then. I mean, I did Pilates when I was 14. I was doing Pilates. I didn't know it was called Pilates, but I was doing it and it was fun.
Yeah,
but
that is so unusual, isn't it? Not just Pilates, but for that movement and exercise to continue. Perhaps unless, like you found a real niche in dance, and something that you wanted to stick with, and you wanted to. So, if you had to sum that up, how should we educate our daughters, our younger family members? What do you think are the key things that we should be telling them and teaching them and encouraging them to do?
I mean, I think that one of the things is just to say again is about agency, is about really listening to the communication that your body is giving you, and that you genuinely are the expert in you. You are the expert in you. And I think that we, even as adults, we're looking to find out from an expert outside of us about a specific thing to do with us. And yes, we need our experts and our healthcare professionals. And we also need to be responsible for ourselves and learning enough about ourselves that we know when something has changed, when something is different. So we definitely teach that. And I think exploring breath is a really important thing for young people, because part of technique, we're getting all this upper respiratory breathing where you're just breathing chest up, and that's creates more stress, reduces sensation in the rest of the body. And if we could get breath everywhere into the pores of our skin, everywhere in our body, we would feel more, they would be more responsive, they would be clearer in their mind. So I think those are the things I would say.
It seems so straightforward when you say that, but we don't generally do it. And I was thinking about when I got to my 20s, I think there was an age in my early 20s where I did start to become a little bit more active again. And I think this is quite a common pattern. I joined a gym.
Brilliant.
For me, that was more, I think it started off as a social thing. I'd go with a friend, we'd go to some classes. And then I started to get quite interested in how I looked and what it was doing to my appearance, which I hadn't really thought about before. So I used to go to classes at the gym, and I started to enjoy swimming as well. I had quite big shoulders, I think, at one point. But again, it was, for me, sounds quite vain, doesn't it? But I think it was about, I hadn't really thought about how exercise can impact the way that you look. But do you think I'm right in saying that generally people usually come to Pilates a little bit later than this, and why do you think that is?
Oh, it's so interesting. I think it really varies, and it depends on the type of Pilates and the type of environment. And you know, Pilates is actually quite in its infancy,
right?
Because it's really only been a generic name since the year 2000. So we're only actually, as we record this, 22 years old. And when you think about that in the grand scheme of other industries, that's quite young. And so there isn't necessarily a pattern just yet that we can follow. And I actually encourage the teachers that I train and anybody that I mentor to break away from the traditions that we might be seeing. So it used to be early in the days when Joseph Pilates had his studio in New York, that it would be well-to-do women who would come in with a full face of makeup, who could do their workout and then leave. So it wasn't a sweaty gym.
Yeah, they could break into a sweat.
And then they could go and have lunch.
Yeah.
I think that we've definitely moved away from that. And I still think that there's more work to be done because we're in our infancy. It could be, Pilates could be anything and anywhere. Like, I think we need it in schools. We need a team of people who are going to go into the education system and shake it up with Pilates. That would be amazing. I think
Pilates.
I think young girls need education on the function of their bodies and how it's changing, and future proofing for whatever they choose to do as they become into mature women. And I think right now in our studio, we have the whole range.
Oh, do you?
Absolutely, the
What's
whole
the
range.
youngest?
I'm gonna get, I think that she's 17.
Okay.
So one of my clients' daughter comes to a class whilst she does another class. So they're not in class together, they do it independent because she's coming of her own choice, which really matters. And this particular young lady, I remember when she was born, so I worked with her mummy at postnatal, and then it's kind of carried on, which is amazing. And then we have people that are almost 90, with quite a lot at that end of the age spectrum as well. So we do have all ages.
And would that be your dream? What would your dream be for, we know Pilates in its infancy, if we think about the children that we've talked about, and the teenage and the young, the sort of in their 20s, probably to early 30s, what would be the ideal for you?
I think I share the same vision that Joseph Pilates had, that everybody would do Pilates in their home as part of their everyday well-being, and to use the word that we used before, nourishment. That it was just part and parcel of our daily regime to keep ourselves healthy and well, and everybody just knows what Pilates is.
And even if they don't know what it is, they're doing the exercise.
Doing it, exactly.
Yeah. So let's end the episode with your Claire shares 3 pearls of wisdom. What 3 things that we've discussed would you say to your younger self? What advice would you give yourself about movement, knowing what you know now?
Knowing what I know now, I would remind myself that movement is nourishment. I mentioned before that I had a point, after I had my first, this was in our last episode, where I had postnatal depression, and it actually took somebody outside to say to me, you just need to do what you know. You need to do the movement. And so I would remind myself that in all periods of life, movement is nourishment, exercise is nourishment. And so I would remind myself that. And I would also bring it back to breath. Always just bring it back to breath. When you're stressed, when you're worried, when something doesn't feel right, when you're aching, when you're tired, just bring it back to breath.
Oh, that's fascinating. And as you've said that, I don't know if you know, I did a quick breathing in, because we do, or I do. I notice I do shallow breathe.
So that's so important. I think that if we can take a moment every day just to come back to the breath, and then share it. Share it is what I would say. So making sure that wherever there's an opportunity to share, an opportunity to move, share it with children, share it with other people. So
oh, this has been so great. It's been really interesting to look back on, for me personally, on what I could have done differently, and also to understand what I can now do to help my kids to carry on moving now and in the future. So thank you so much, Claire.
Thank you, Sophie. It's been great to chat as always. And we'll continue with the theme of identity in our next episode. And I'll look forward to sharing more then. So in the meantime, let us know what you think of this episode. Like, share, do all the things you know you need to do to help other people find us. And we'd really love you to let us know if there's anything else you'd like us to cover in further episodes. Thank you so much for listening. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.